So good evening, and thanks for joining us tonight for Copperfield's Books, a virtual event with Emily Willingham. My name is Jamie Madsen. I'm the Marketing and Events Coordinator here at Copperfields, and I'll also be your host for the evening. So just a couple of things to note before we get started. Go ahead and keep an eye on your chat box. I will be using this during the event to provide details about tonight's title and other information that you might need. And the format tonight will feature between 35 to 45 minutes of speaking and will then be followed by a live Q&A. So please go ahead and submit your questions and comments as they come up under the Q&A icon, which you can find at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we really appreciate that. So I'm really excited to introduce tonight's author, Emily Willingham. Emily is a journalist and science writer who earned a PhD in biology and completed a postdoctoral fellowship in urology. Her writing has appeared in the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, Undark, San Francisco Chronicle, and many other outlets. She is a regular contributor to Scientific American and lives in Marin County. And she is with us tonight to discuss her title, Phallacy, Life Lessons from the Animal Penis. And I've received so many exciting comments from people excited about tonight. So I'm gonna go ahead and hand it straight over to you, Emily.
Thanks so much, Jamie, I appreciate it. I'm starting this first slide, not because I'm super vain, but because since we can't do this in person, I wanted to pretend like this is me in person speaking to you. And I'm glad to be here and to talk a little bit about my book and some of its themes. This slide looks terrifying, I know, but there's not going to be a quiz. This is just a list of some of our life lessons from the animal penis. There's a lot that we can learn if we bother to look at the genitalia of other animals. And so I'm going to step through some of these as I go through these slides tonight, and hopefully, some of the lessons will resonate. So there are lots of animals that don't have penises, and one of the patterns that we see, and I should highlight this pattern here, is that the more features a penis has, the less animals go through and check a bunch of boxes before they make physical contact. But if you don't have a penis involved at all, you don't have some method of getting gametes inside the other animal, then you have a lot of other options in the animal kingdom. And so I wanted to look at a few of those with you all. So there's the features thing, and these animals don't have a penis. And so the other lesson is not all animals have a penis, and not all of them even have a vagina or some place to place sperm. And there, for example, the bedbug is kind of notorious because it does hypodermic insemination, where it just kind of stabs. It's not funny probably for the bedbug, stabs its partner in the abdomen, inserts and then drops off the semen there. There's not a vagina or anything else in a bedbug. Some animals have both. They have both a sperm delivery system and a system for receiving it, and some animals have neither. And so we're going to take a look at some of them. This is a member of a group of animals called the Springtails, and they're so cute. I have a story about them in Phallacy. This is not this species, it's a different species of them, where the female is a lot bigger than the male. And the way these animals operate is they use these things right here. If I hope this is pointing to what I think it is. That is what I call sperm on a stick, or a sperm lollipop, but technically it's called the Spermatophore. And if you don't have a piece of anatomy to get a gamete inside your partner, this kind of tends to work too if you're on land. And what they do, the male will set up this little spermatophore here. And in one of these springtail species, the female is so much bigger, and the male has to go through all of these behaviors to get her situated so that her sort of genital opening is right over the spermatophore and will pick it up. But the hitch is that she's a lot bigger. They go through this whole process where she's kind of swinging him around like a lariat almost. And she sometimes decides that she doesn't want to get placed over it, and she just eats it instead, which is not, I guess, a desirable outcome for the male. But what these animals have to do, and a lot of animals that lay down spermatophores, is they do have some kind of intimate contact quite often. And they go through kind of a little waltz to get the positioning of the spermatophore to pick it up. This is a frog, And it's kind of an unusual frog. Frogs lay their eggs in water and the gametes come together because there's a kind of a spawn, and the water brings everything together and you get little frogs out of that. And this works pretty well for most frogs because they are in still water and nothing is going to wash the eggs away. This little frog right here is one of 2 members of this genus, and you'll notice that it has this little kind of unusual looking appendage here. And some people have mistaken that for a tail, but what it is really is kind of a sperm superslide. And they have this because they mate midstream in fast moving water. And so if the eggs emerge from the female and then the sperm comes out and they try to fuse it's not going to work. And so this little appendage gets inserted into the female very much just like a penis does, but it's technically not a penis, and genitalia people will argue about this kind of thing. So technically not a penis, but it does allow for a little super slide for the sperm to get into the female. This is a beautiful animal, and it is one of just so many species that have both a penis and a vagina. Essentially, they make both sperm and eggs. And what is interesting about this particular little beauty of a sea slug is that it has another technique, and that is that it's got basically a tripartite penis, and it can mate with a partner, and then the penis has kind of these predisposed break points, and so it'll break off and leave 2 little bits behind. So then it can mate with 2 more partners and break off those 2 little bits sequentially as well, which means it gets to mate, I guess 3 times in a row. And the other thing about it is that if you leave something behind in a mate, it makes it a lot harder for a competitor to get anything in there. And so you see this kind of pattern pretty often in a lot of animals where maybe a little something gets left behind so that a competitor doesn't really have as good of a chance to make a deposit themselves. But this is a beautiful, beautiful animal. One of my chapters in the book is called Small but Mighty, because I think that humans, I think we tend to be especially proud of our penises for lots of reasons. And one of the claims about them is that they're really big and that they look how amazing, and and a lot of people like to argue that they have a lot of accoutrement, they have decorations on them and a lot of special features, but they don't. And when you start to look at other penises in the animal kingdom, you realize that no, there's nothing very particularly decorative about the human penis. And the upshot of that is that if there aren't a lot of spikes and spines and hooks and claws and things like that on a penis, you can probably have a lot more fun with it. And the pattern tends to be the more unadorned the penis is, the more partners have to do things to establish intimacy before they make physical contact. So you kind of get to the point where you can kind of look at a penis and go, okay, they're probably not getting super intimate before copulation takes place, or there's a lot of competition among males and they're just kind of coming one after the other and mating with a female, and there's competition there. So let's take a look. The more features a penis has, the fewer the behaviors before physical contact. So this is an aquatic animal, and its name, Calimbasothon aplecticos, which I think I just butchered. The people who named this was a group of 4 researchers. This is 1 millimeter long, this animal, and it lived 425 million years ago, and it is small but mighty. Its claim to fame is that it is the oldest known penis. We got lucky that it was fossilized and that it was found, but its name means amazing swimmer with a large penis, because the researchers who discovered it were very impressed with the size of the animal's penis relative to the animal itself. And this was kind of a little shrimp-like creature that probably scuttled around on the ocean floor a very long time ago. Another small but mighty and very famous fossil is this one. This is an image. The actual one was about, just 1 millimeter, a few millimeters long. So this is a bit blown up, of the world's oldest known erection. And this was a little animal. It's not a spider, it's an arachnid, but not a spider, that's called a harvestman. And I think some people call them daddy long legs, but they're not actually spiders. And this little fellow lived in what's now Myanmar almost 100 million years ago. And I guess he made news for people who are very interested in spiders because it also had enormous eyes. And I guess with those enormous eyes, it must have spotted an inamorata and become, interested in her and had this erection, this hydraulic erection. And at the same time, the tree it was on loosened some sap, captured the little guy, and he got stuck in amber. And so we ended up finding that because humans can find all kinds of odd things. And so this is the world's oldest known erection, another small but mighty entry. Another thing that if you read the book, you'll see a lot of examples of this, is that we think of that sperm get into a partner if there's copulation by way of a penis, but animals actually don't always use penises to insert and to deposit sperm, or in some cases to draw it up into their own bodies. And so here are a couple of examples. These are spiders. Obviously, I just think they're so cute. Look at their eyes. I just think they're adorable. But you can see the two appendages that each of them has here at the front, and at the tips of these appendages are called pedipalps, and at the tips of these are these structures called palpal bulbs, and that is what gets inserted into the partner for the sperm to be dropped off. You'll notice there are two of them, and that is because spiders have what essentially amounts to two vaginas, and so they can be doubly mated. And there's one spider that the male actually removes one of his arms, inserts the remaining pedipalp into, removes one of his pedipalps, inserts the remaining one into a female, drops off his sperm. She starts to suck the life out of him, which is called a nuptial gift. It's a way of getting nutrition for the member of the mating pair that's responsible for actually making the tiny new ones. And even while that's happening, another male can come along and actually put his remaining pedipalp in her other vaginal opening or her other vagina. So spiders have all kinds of interesting ways of accomplishing reproduction, but I just think that they're really cute. Another use of an appendage. This is a millipede species, and some species of millipedes, they don't use penises either. You know how millipedes are. They're famous because they have so many feet, right? Well, actually, in this picture, it shows it really well. This is the 8th pair of legs, and this is the 9th pair of legs, and those are actually called gonopods. And this is what a millipede uses to transfer sperm to a partner. And it actually has a 2-step process to do this. It first does kind of a test poke with an empty set of its 8th pair of legs, just kind of just see if there's a fit. Like the hypothesis is that millipedes are millipedes. They're not just like, hey, you're my species, I'm sure of it, let's go. And so instead they do this kind of confirmation poke, and then if that, I guess if everything seems like it fit like it should, they draw up their sperm from this pair of legs into this one. Now it's charged, and they go in for the second poke and deposit the gametes. So it's another use of a not penis to achieve internal fertilization. Now, if you take a look at this is a penis. And you think about what I said about the pattern of, well, if it has a lot of features to it, then you're probably looking at an animal that perhaps doesn't either check off a lot of boxes before making physical contact, or there's a lot of competition among males to deposit sperm. And you would be right in this case. I have the title on this to the left is the famous seed beetle penis. This is one species of seed beetle. And up in the right-hand corner is a seed beetle. It's not exactly the species. I'm using open access images, so I didn't want to use one I wasn't allowed to. But they're very similar. And you can see it's not, unless you're an entomologist who's very into seed beetles, not the most beautiful animal on earth, but the penises are famous. And you can see that this has spikes and barbs and hooks and all kinds of things on it. And it does make a mark in the genital tract of the partner. But what some studies suggest is that these wounds actually allow some of the semen that's deposited to serve as nutrition for the recipient, for the seed beetle's mate, again, kind of supporting the reproductive process that she's involved in. I have occasionally, had people say, I'm not really interested in penises. This is not my thing. And so I don't know why a penis book would be of interest. And I say, well, there's a Trojan horse in this book because the central chapter of the book is actually about vaginas, and it's called Enter the Vagina. And there's a reason for that. One of the principles in evolution is that there's this concept sort of coevolution, that if you see something that looks like it's adaptive in some way, like this penis right here, for example, you think, okay, there's something selecting for this. You don't just randomly get all these features on a structure that's so important to reproduction. There's something that's making these choices. And that's something, one of the most likely candidates would be what this interacts with in a partner. And so, biological principles would suggest that you would look in the partner to see, wow, what's going on over there? But what I found out, if you take a look at the research on this, is that we don't actually look at it as much as you would think, or really that much at all by comparison. This fellow right here, I really enjoy his name because his nickname was Bunny. But this is Colin Austin. He was a highly respected embryologist, and he wrote a really useful survey. It's what we call a review paper in 1985. And in that, he notes, he says, oh, we've given all this more attention to male organs of behavior than to the female. And then he says, that's because the males are just so much more interesting, basically, than the females. And he says, so, we can find out more from looking at the males. And gosh, I hope that we aren't missing anything important by the fact that we haven't been looking at the female side of the story at all. And the thing is that, yes, important things were being missed by that. And it doesn't seem especially, biologically sound and robust. It's not just him. It's like tons of researchers over decades and decades that the female side of things has just kind of been omitted in a lot of ways. So let's talk about ducks. Lots of people like to talk about ducks. Their penises are kind of famous or infamous. You can see this as an example of a duck penis right here. And again, this is not your basic penis. This is not a bland organ. This has its corkscrews, it has folds, it's got pointy bits, and then also the way it's used is ducks engage, the males they engage in what's called forced copulation. I don't use the term rape to describe what non-human animals do because that's kind of more of a legal term, but this is a very forced situation. And the way that this thing emerges is almost ballistic. It's just really fast. And so this has been known for a very long time. I remember in graduate school in the 90s, there's some paper about, the blue, some blue Amazonian duck or something, and the size of its penis was as long as the animal itself. And everybody's like, ooh, ah. But look at it. You think, well, okay, if there's something making a corkscrewed penis, you would think, well, let's look at if there's some kind of interaction going on there. What's happening on the other side of that? This century, somebody finally did that. It wasn't until this century. And that somebody was Patricia Brennan, who is very well known and has looked at a lot. She leads the research on this, I think, in large part, and she's done it across a lot of different animals now. But she was working in a lab in the UK, and they were dissecting out ducks, and they had the vaginas right there, but they weren't looking at them. They were just kind of cutting straight up to get to the very inside end of it to see, I think, what was happening with sperm deposition there. And she thought, we should look at what's this thing is going on with this thing. So she got a duck and she actually dissected out the vagina of the duck. And what you see over here is an example. And what is fascinating about this is that it communicates this tension that forced copulation would imply. And that is that the vagina has an inverse corkscrew to the penile corkscrew, the torque of it. And it has a lot of cul-de-sacs and places where sperm can get trapped and end up going nowhere. There's little sperm dead ends and that kind of thing. And so there's there's a tug of war going on where the genitalia, where the rubber hits the road with these ducks. And we did not look at that or examine that until Patricia Brennan did this in this century. And as I was reading more and more about this and working on this book, somebody in, I think it was 2015, did a survey of the literature looking at what do researchers, write about, examine, ask questions about? And it's still overwhelmingly about genitalia that we associate with male animals and with delivery of sperm, and much less so about the other side of things. And the thing is, and this is a fellow who's an entomologist. This was his dissertation at Texas A&M University. I just love this quote, and I feel like it should be on a T-shirt, because he wrote, "Genitalia did not evolve chaotically. This is not chaos, and this is not chaos." But the dismissal of this side of the equation has really been, it's not great, but this is the thing that gets scientists, pretty excited about science. There's so much more to learn because we haven't bothered to look at it yet. So, that means there are a lot more questions out there to ask and to answer, as long as we have maybe a more diverse demographic of people asking and answering them. So that got a little bit serious, I understand. And so I wanted to also there's so much fun stuff about genitalia in the animal kingdom. And so I wanted to share some of the fun things about it. And I should mention, the title of the book, Phallacy, with a PH, is a pun, obviously, on the word fallacy, which is, of course, spelled normally with an F. And the fallacy that I address most in this book is the appeal to nature fallacy. We tend to try to rationalize and defend behaviors, or to excoriate them by turning to nature and saying, look, nature does this, so that must make it okay that I am doing it. Or nature doesn't have this, and so therefore you should not be doing that. And the thing is that we don't have very many good comparators for us as a species. We are sui generis. We are the only living members of our genus. No other Homo species exists. We're separated from chimpanzees by at least 6 million years of evolution. And so our best comparator is probably ourselves. If you're human and there's something that we do, that's probably what we do. But there are people who, like to point to animals and make these comparisons and demonstrate, to rationalize things, or to say that things aren't natural. And as we'll see in just a little bit, that's also not the way to use or abuse biology or nature. Nature doesn't work that way. So some fun stuff. This is a turtle penis. I hadn't really mentioned, but in vertebrates, there are a few ways that a penis can become erect. You may be familiar with the human method, which is there's, some hydraulics there. It gets filled with blood, the spongy tissues, gets suffused, and it stays erect for a while. But in some species like turtles and crocodilians, their penises are kind of ready to go at all times. And so they have a muscle when the time to use it has arrived that kind of pops it out like an airbag. And so this is just an example of kind of your average turtle penis right here, the turtle airbag. There are videos, by the way. I curated a selection of videos you can go see, and there's one of an alligator where the penis is popping out like an airbag. So you can go check that out on YouTube under my channel there. I love snakes. I love reptiles so much, and this one reason they're just so interesting is because of their genitalia. This is the unassuming pine oak snake here on the right. It's a snake that lives in Mexico. It's really pretty in a super understated way. On the left is part of its penis. Snakes and lizards have what are called hemipenes. The singular of that is hemipenis. And what you see there on the left is just half of it. So this snake has 2 of these as a fork on the head of its penis. And you can see that there's a lot going on with these hemipenes of the snake. And if you go have the, I would say, courage to Google hemipenes or snake hemipenes, you can see all kinds of amazing examples of these online. When it comes to mammals, one of the things that distinguishes a few orders of mammals is that their penises have bones in them, and they can sort of just like slide the bone in when the time for use has come. Here are a few examples. The thing about these bones, the bone singular is called a baculum and plural is bacula. And you can see the shapes on these things look kind of just nutty, right? Look at the rice rat. It has a trident bone inside of its penis. And nobody's quite sure exactly. Like, there are lots of hypotheses and people have tested a lot of possible explanations, but nothing has really come down conclusively about what these do. And it may vary from species to species anyway. We do not have a penis bone, but other primates do. It's one of the many things that we do not have on or in our penis that other primates do. Some of the animals that have these, they're the, let's see, the primates have bats have them, rodents and have them, animals that eat insects have them. Some little, like a pica, like some rabbit type creatures have them as well. And also these. So it used to be that bacula were something that was a mammalian thing, but I dug around in the literature and I found that this class of lizards, either varanid or monitor lizards, and the biggest one of these, of course, is the Komodo dragon. And like all lizards, it does have hemipenes. It has a two-headed penis, and in each of those, it has a little bone. It has, excuse me, but it has double dick bones. And I just think that's amazing that a dragon would have that. And the other thing I found is that some of the lizards that, so there are also clitoral bones, and they're called the balbellum. And some of these lizards have that as well. I just thought that was fascinating. This is another beautiful sea slug or nudibranch. This is in the genus Cephopteron. And there's a video of these online, and they are like most sea slugs. They have both, they make both sperm and eggs, and they have both penises and vaginas. And but one thing that these things do also have is this kind of hypodermic spiky structure. It's kind of hard to see here because they're so sort of translucent, but it's this here. And when they're doing their mating, and sometimes there are three, they're having a good time, I guess. And they spin, they go through this kind of mesmerizing spin. And then the process of it, they've got the penis and they're doing what they do with that, but then they're jobbing about with this hypodermic. And this one, I think, is stabbing its partner in the foot with it. But there's one species that stabs them right between the eye spots, and it deposits this sort of like almost sort of a seminal fluid that may or may not kind of influence the behavior of the partner. Nobody's quite sure, which I know sounds kind of creepy, but they're beautiful and it's really interesting to watch. And that's also in that video collection. Okay, so one of the things that people do when they appeal to nature is they say, oh, if it has a penis, it's male. Okay, period. That's not true. That's not how that works at all. We are humans. Humans just like buckets, and we're especially good when they're just like two, and we just kind of put everything in one or the other of those buckets, and we get a little, I'm speaking of us collectively, not individual, just kind of, oh no, there are more two buckets, getting complicated, there are overlaps, and but that's just, nature has all kinds of buckets. There's more than one species of animal where the structure that transfers the sperm is not on the partner that's making the sperm. And so the seahorse is probably the greatest example of that. It's not technically a penis or anything like that the female seahorse has, but she places this ovipositor into the pouch of her partner and deposits eggs into it. And then his sperm comes out of a little pore and kind of oozes into this pouch really quickly. It's timed pretty quickly. But a really famous example are these cave insects, and I think they're finding more and more of these in Brazil. And this one made kind of a big news because they looked at the females, at the animal that makes the eggs, and it had this structure that they called very penis-like, but anyway, and the female would insert this structure into something very vagina-like on the male and draw up the sperm from the male into her body. And so that is a sperm transfer using an insertional anatomical tool on the organism that makes the eggs. And the course of my research, I found so many examples of animals that operate this way. Okay. Another thing about penises, which I already kind of mentioned, is we really like to think of ours as being superlative in some way or another. And they're superlative in many different ways that we as a species have found to use them, but they're not superlative in the ways I think a lot of people like to talk about. For example, they don't win for being the longest penis among primates, certainly not among animals in general. There's a 22-way tie for penis size among primates, and we're in it. They certainly don't win for having the most features. They may be in the running for having the fewest. Here's an example of some penises on primates. You can see they're all labeled. And you can, if you look at them, you can tell this is a lot more features even on these primates than the human penis has. A lot of them have spines. We don't have spines on our penis. And that's because we lost the gene variant that encoded for that somewhere in our Homo genus, because Neanderthals probably didn't have it either, and neither did the Denisovans, but our primate cousins all do have it. And it's also the same gene that makes you have whiskers, which we don't have either. So, I guess the alternative is to be walking around with a bunch of whiskers. One of the things I like about this image, though, is if you look at the top right here at the stump-tailed macaque, that penis really stands out among these others because of the shape. It's got this kind of spade shape to it. And again, if you're operating on some basic biological principle, you would look at that and think, wow, what is selecting for that penis shape, right? Well, it turns out somebody actually did look at the female macaque, and in the vagina of the macaque, there's kind of a stalactite that kind of hangs from the ceiling of the vagina and creates a very narrow opening underneath it for anything to get through. And so it looks like, there's some kind of tension here, and that this stalactite, vaginal stalactite, is kind of what's driving the selection for this sort of spade shape in the stump-tailed macaque. Just some other examples of penises that are just so kind of more interesting than our own, and these are all, our mammalian cousins. This is actually sculptures at the University of Florida in Gainesville, where some of our genitalia researcher family members are, and made a pilgrimage there to talk to some folks. And also because there's a famous lake there, Lake Apopka, where the alligators kind of notoriously were thought to have penises that were getting smaller because of chemical contamination there. But what you can see here in the sculpture is this is the bull, this is a ram, this is a cat penis, and this is a boar or pig penis. This is one of my favorites. If you think that, to claim that the human penis has, lots of interesting features and stuff, this is actually the penis of a very small, common little snail that lives around Sydney Harbor in Australia. And when the researchers first found it and looked at it, they thought it was a parasite. And they are not the first to look at a penis on, especially an invertebrate, and think it was a parasite. But it turns out, no, this is actually the snail's penis. And so it's called Phallomedusa solida because it's a marine snail. And this obviously has a sort of Medusa-like quality to it. There's a really great example of thinking that the penis was a parasite with the paper nautilus, which is not a paper thing or a nautilus. It's a kind of octopus. They're kind of unusual because they can float on the surface of the water and then sink suddenly. They sort of use this paper-like thing as a ballast. And the females are much, much, much bigger than the males. And so if the male were to approach the female, she'd probably just eat him, essentially. And so the way that this octopus sort of solves that problem is that it gets these spermatophores, which are those kind of sperm on a stick, and it uses one of its arms, one of its 8 arms, and it kind of gets those, and it sneaks up to the female and just drops off the whole arm. It's like if you were bringing like a bunch of flowers, you just left your arm. And so they used to find the females, and the females would have all these little bitty wiggly things in them, and they thought at first that those were parasites, but no, those were the dropped off arms of the very tiny males with their spermatophores in them. And that arm is called the hectocotylus. And it's a common tactic actually for cephalopods. One thing you might not know about Charles Darwin, unless you're just a huge fan, is that he spent a huge amount of his life researching and writing monographs about barnacles. And I'm just bringing up the barnacle here because he found one kind of species of barnacle on his voyage on the Beagle, and he brought it home. He was very taken with it, and he thought that this was it had all these little things on it, and he thought, oh, it's got these little parasites on it, and it turned out no, those were the males. And then it turns out if you look even closer, like this would be the female, this whole thing here, and this little teeny thing would be the male. And if you look even closer, it has the biggest penis relative to size on Earth. And so this is a very famous barnacle because of that. It actually wins first prize for that. If you're just going to go with like what has the hugest penis on Earth, it's obviously the blue whale, because they get to be up to 10 feet long. Again, if you want to enter the who has the most interesting penis Olympics, the echidna is going to probably go place in one of the medal categories, because this is an egg-laying mammal. It's a monotreme. It's one of the 2 monotreme species. They're so interesting. And one of the things that's interesting about them is that their penises have 4 heads, not 2. And they will actually ejaculate. I apologize, this is a very close-up picture of this, but they'll ejaculate out of 2 heads at a time. And like some other animals that are kind of very closely related to them, they have 2 vaginas. And so they'll do, insertion of 2s on one side, insertion on the other. They're just fascinating animals. Also, they make pink milk, and their babies are called puggles. They're just, you should go look into the echidna. Because I was writing a book about penises, of course, I had to make a pilgrimage to the Icelandic Phallological Museum, which is, as it kind of says on the tin, a museum that is full of phalli. And I had mixed feelings about being at the museum. I was sort of surprised at how I reacted to it. It is a lot of disembodied penises from a lot of really amazing animals. This one here is a sperm whale. And I don't know, I write in the book about sort of the feelings I had about being in that museum, but I did enjoy the gift shop. This is a Viking dress. This is Iceland, right? So here's a penis dressed as a Viking. I don't know what's going on with that other one. It's the happy face penis with the tie. But anyway, the gift shop was pretty entertaining. Okay. In the first chapter of the book, one of the things I talk about, because this is about sort of setting the record straight a little bit about the human penis. There are a lot of studies that purport to sort of figure out what it is that women, in this case, usually, I would say usually cishet women, but it's not even that, but what they want when it comes to the penis, oh, they want length, or they want width, and all this other stuff. And the thing is when you find the studies where they really do actually ask women that question, and they listen to what the women say, the length and the width don't win over some other features, and they're actually kind of in a tie with each other. And what the partners, what they really want from sex partners is just like intimacy, not in like a romantic way, but kind of knowing what they're doing, and also kind of knowing that they got other body parts they can use to establish a process here. And I think that fits with the pattern of our pretty unadorned penis, that we've got, some other things that we do, a checklist that we go through before we get to this point where, there's physical contact and we are engaged with each other. What I'm about to talk about, and this will close out the talk, is something then in the last chapter. The chapter is kind of bookended. The book is bookended with chapters about humans. So the last chapter takes a look at how we kind of came to center the penis to the exclusion of entire people, like the whole individual, and just really focused on, do you have a penis? Do you not? What's going on in schools in some states, and the people trying to make a stir about, children in sports, and the transgender children, we have to check on these things. So I took a look at this. It would take books and books, but I did take a look at how we came to center the penis like this, and then kind of the impossible pressures this places on people who have them and people who do not have them. And so what happens when we center the penis this way is that we create what I think of as impossible masculinity, and it's not good for anybody. I don't know that this necessarily started here, but it certainly goes back this far. This is the Egyptian god Men. This is Men here, and he's depicted, this is kind of the intersection of, we're using the penis to symbolize strength and fertility, and there's agriculture. And so Men is here, and he's depicted as having this erect penis. It's parallel to the ground, and then he's holding a scythe. And then this is a close-up of it. I was in, I think, the Louvre when I took this picture. I don't know. I took a close up. Okay, I just did it. And if you look at other ancient societies, Western societies, you see, for example, these amulets and rings that actually were meant for children to wear. And they were supposed to be protective. They often were phalli with wings and things like that. And they were actually called fascinum, which is where we get the word fascinate, because what they were supposed to be doing was drawing off the evil eye away from the child. And so this was like this protective thing that that the fascinum was doing. And Priapus himself, the Greek god associated with, as you can see, having an enormous erection, started out as a scarecrow. So another association with this like agriculture and protection, that kind of thing, but kind of morphed into, this is actually a picture from the Pompeii exhibit at the Legion of Honor. And, morphed into this kind of grotesque caricature of an erection. You're getting to the point where, the penis is almost as big as the man when you take a look at this. And at some point they erased a man entirely, and there was a minor deity called Tutinus that was just a penis. So you kind of get, where did the person go? All that's left behind is this. And in the book, I'm not going to get into details about it here. It gets sort of heavy, but I do talk about, the rise of Christianity and sort of the effects of that. And there's a really great story from an Icelandic saga in there that involving a worship of a horse penis. So if we're into that kind of thing. But this is an interesting mural. This is from the 13th century. It's at Massa Marittima. I probably said that wrong. I'm sorry for anybody who knows Italian, in Tuscany. And this was in the town square. There's a bath, and it's just this big mural, the old town walking by, 13th century. You can see this. This is a tree. It's some kind of ficus, which is a fig type tree. And it has penises growing on it. They're a phalli, complete with testicles. And below it, you've got this series of women, and they're like harvesting them and fighting over them, maybe. And they're maybe even having a snack here in the middle. Nobody's quite sure what's going on with this tree, but it's part of this like pattern of penis trees that sort of emerged in the Middle Ages. And it's kind of hard to know what was supposed to be happening here. Like some people have posited these were witches and they're harvesting it. But I thought it was interesting in part because this is some relative of the fig, and it's a completely different use of the fig leaf, because normally you'd be using a giant fig leaf to cover up the penis. In the last chapter, I also write a bit about the influence of the Hammer of Witches, which is this book right here, Malleus Maleficarum. And this was written by a guy named Kramer. And one of the reasons I write about it is because he wrote about how women were going to steal your penises. They were going to cast glamour, which meant they were just going to kind of blind you with their charms, essentially, in a magical way, and then run off with your penis. It was a really big fear that was something that women could do. And so you also see in some of the sort of marginalia and things like that in books from the medieval period, these women are like harvesting penises. And there's some where they've like got little baskets of penises, or they're feeding them like little baby birds, things like that. And so you start to get this intersection where the penis is under threat, and it is a threat. And where is the person that would be attached to it? And I think that's, you look around now at people and what we do and how we talk about them. And I think that when we, in modern society, are centering them so much, and we do have a lot of discourse around penises, and a lot of it is not positive, that we erase the person who has it. And so where I land in the book is that what we need to focus on isn't our penis, which is not very startling once you looked at the array of penises in the animal kingdom. But what is really special about us and unique about us is our brain. We are the only species in our genus, and our human brain is a unique brain. And so as a result of that, I did write a book about the brain, and I take a look at our brain and our social behaviors and things like that. And if you do buy either of my books or anybody's books, I really, really encourage you to please go indie. I really love the Copperfields in San Rafael. I can't wait to go to the one they have that they've moved now to the former Danish furniture store. I think it's probably bigger, but we love to go into Copperfields, just browse and buy stacks of books. And it's just go indie, buy your books, please, through the independent bookstore. And thank you so much for your time.
This has been so fascinating. I'm so thrilled we had you with us tonight. And we do have questions, but of course, as always, we have so many thank yous and people just saying this presentation was awesome. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so, and I also did share a link to pre-order Emily's upcoming title. So be sure to look in the chat. I hope we can have you in person for that one. But let's get to a couple questions. Mac has a question and he says, you just taught me that other mammals and reptiles also have bones in their penises. What is the advantage of this over the sort of erection that human males get?
Yeah, so that's a thing that then nobody's quite sure about. For example, pinnipeds like walruses, or if you go down, to the coast and you encounter elephant seals, I mean, they have bones, and they think maybe in that case it might be to brace on land because they're so darn big, and it helps to have a bone in there when you're trying to. But nobody's quite sure. It's a really great question that I don't have the answer to because they haven't quite answered it yet.
Interesting. And another question, your point about what women want reinforces what is called sex without penetration, an emphasis on intimacy using hands, fingers, mouths, etc. This needs to receive much greater emphasis in an American world that still adores penis size. Do you agree?
Of course, I agree. I think, yes, absolutely. And I think that studies that really do take that as a serious research question, their findings bear that out, certainly.
Okay, Rosabelle is wondering, is it true that swans have the same mate for life? Are their encounters forced copulations like ducks?
So I think I'm sort of not an expert on swans. Waterfowl in general tend to kind of lean towards forced copulation, but swans do pair bond, and actually ducks pair bond too. So it's not all forced copulation all the time. But I think that what I read about swans is that they may be sort of serial monogamous or something like that. Sorry, I'm not a swan expert, but it is common to waterfowl, the forced copulation.
Great, and we have been getting, I did share your YouTube channel, but people are really interested in the alligator video, and I'm not sure if it's there. So maybe tonight you can send it to me and I can include it in the email tomorrow if you can find it.
Sure. Yeah. Be glad
So
to do
for all
that.
of you asking, you'll get it tomorrow.
The airbag alligator.
I'm just laughing about, thinking what people are searching for that.
Google searches.
Yeah, right. Okay, and Bethany has a question. How should people go about decentering the penis? What are some ways we should behave to promote the human over the penis?
Yeah, I have a couple of suggestions for that. One of the things I've noticed in our political discourse is that, and progressives do this a lot, is that if somebody shows a behavior that is aggressive or threatening, like they go into a Starbucks with an AK-47, for example, or an AR-15, somebody says, oh, small dick energy, and they reduce this very complicated human behavior that has to do with like in-group posturing and performance and probably maybe self-esteem and lots of other things to just, oh, you must have a tiny penis, which, I mean, no, that reduces that entire human being to that. And I'm not sympathetic to what the person is doing, but it doesn't help us to take these ideas about, related to toxic masculinity and use them against people. If you're progressive, that's not being progressive to do that.
I'm sorry, but the part where it showed the image of the women picking penises off of the tree just had me dying. I can't wait.
There's a whole cottage industry of that going on.
Oh my gosh. And did you actually purchase the penis toys? I guess
they were like little, there were some wind up toys. I think because I'm a nerd, I bought a book.
Hey, research, right?
Yeah. I didn't, it was like, oh, I'm going to get my grandma this wind up penis. I was just not going to do anything like that.
And last question, what is next? I know you have your book, but where can people expect to see you? Is there any upcoming events or, besides the book, which again, I hope we'll get in person. But yeah, how can people stay in the know about what you're up to.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you can follow me on Twitter at EJ, or not follow me, find me there, EJ Willingham. And I'm on Instagram at emily.willingham.pht because Emily Willingham was taken. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I just shared your website too, which was also
Okay.
really great. And then for all of you asking, yes, this is being recorded and everyone will receive an email tomorrow that will have a link to the recording, a link to the alligator video, info about tonight's title, the discount code, and also a link to pre-order Emily's upcoming video. So, excuse me, upcoming book. So I really want to thank you again. This has been such an awesome evening, and yeah, wishing you the very, very best.
Wow. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. It was fun.
Great. Well, have a nice evening and we'll see you soon.
You too. Same. Bye-bye.